Hey everybody, I just wanted to change up things today a little bit on I Am Games. We've been doing a lot of game gossip, a lot of game reviews, game first impressions, and retrospectives, but today we're going to do a little bit of game dev, because I wanted to show just how easy it is to make games without coding. I've harped on this a little bit, but I'm really interested in getting more people making games, because for so long I thought I was too dumb to make video games, and then I discovered Construct 3 allowed me to make a game without any coding, and now I'm teaching myself coding, and now that whole world is opening up to me. So I feel like there's a lot of people out there who play video games and probably would want to try making one, but they just feel like it's beyond their skill set. And I'm here to show you that it is super easy to get started using something like Construct 3. Now, I talk about Construct 3 a lot, that's just because it's the tool I use. I'm not shilling for them, they're not paying me. There are other tools like Stencil and gdevelop. Gdevelop is actually completely free if you want to use that. They all work relatively the same way. So while they won't be point for point exactly what I'm about to show you, they are pretty much in the exact same vein. So we're going to go through and make a quick little building block of a platformer game with the help of a certain Italian plumber that I'm sure a lot of you are aware of. So let's open up Construct 3. I have a project here, an empty project. It's just a blue background. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to make a floor for characters to stand on. So the way we're going to do that is going to double click, and it's going to say create a new object type. We're going to want to create a sprite, and now we get a little plus to show where we want to make it. Just put it near the bottom here, and we can draw whatever we want here. We can import graphics, but for the sake of simplicity, I'm just going to make a green box. This will be our floor plane. So we'll just close out of that. And we have this big box. Now I want to change it to be smaller, because obviously we're working with NES style resolution right now, a pixel art kind of game, so I have this document set to. So we're going to change the size from 250 to 16 by 16, a tiny little box. So the next thing we're going to do is we're going to scroll down here and click on the project window to get to our project properties. We have snap to grid enabled, and we're going to change the grid size to 16 by 16. So now we can just drag this around. It will automatically snap to 16 increments. So we can take it, put it near the bottom. Now we can just drag it out, and now we have a floor. Or do we? Right now we have a graphic, but the game engine doesn't know what to do with this. So normally, if you were doing a coding project, you'd have to go in and start coding things and telling it what to do. But since this is a dedicated 2D game engine, it already kind of knows the kind of archetypes of 2D games you can make. So it has these things called behaviors that allow you to kind of automate a lot of the initial setup to make some things easier to use. So in this case, we're going to click on this. We're going to go over to behaviors and add a new behavior. You see we have a ton of different options here, but what we want is solid. And this does pretty much exactly what it sounds like. It says this is a solid object. Things should not pass through it. So without any coding, we've now told the game that this is a solid object, and any other objects we make in the game cannot pass through them. So, pretty simple. Now, we need a character, obviously. Something that the player can control. A floor by itself is not very interesting, so let's double click again. We're going to add a new sprite. We're going to just put it up here, I guess. And instead of drawing something this time, we're going to pull a graphic that I'm sure you're all very familiar with. Mario. NES style Mario. So, we're going to make sure of a couple things. First, we just want to click this here. This is our collision polygon. You can see by default it tries to guess what the shape should look like. Best practice is really to use squares for the most part, since they're quicker to calculate. So if this happens, and sometimes it won't, just do set to bounding box, and that'll just make a square. And this fits pretty well since the Mario image we have is cropped pretty much exactly to that size anyways. So now we have that properly set up. So this is just how it's going to interact with that floor we just talked about. So we have an animation over here. Right now, this is just his standing animation, which since it's an NES game is just one frame. So let's rename this from animation 1 to idle, since when you're not doing anything, this is the pose Mario will be in. So let's exit out of this. Now you can see, here he is. We can drag him around. He's going to snap to those 16 increments just like everything else. So we can put him right on the floor. Now, he doesn't do anything, he's just a graphic. So just like we have a behavior for the floor, we have a behavior for entire characters. We can easily have a foundation for building an interactive character. So we're going to go back into behaviors, add a new behavior, and this time we're going to choose platform. So this gives you a basic setup for platforming controls and logic and like interacting with gravity and stuff with a single click. Again, no coding. So if I click out of this and we preview our game, with the arrow keys, we can already move back and forth and jump, just like that. Now, of course, you're jumping extremely high because we're working at super tiny resolutions. So this looks a little ridiculous compared to the Mario you probably know. But again, not a single line of code and like, what, 3 or 4 clicks? We already have all of this set up. So we can adjust this a little bit if we want to make it a bit more Mario-esque. If we go down here to the behaviors, you see we can click on different objects and we get their settings over here in the sidebar. So let's click on Mario himself. First of all, let's rename him from Sprite to Mario so we can easily find him later. And down here in our platform behavior, you can see we can adjust everything like the max speed, the acceleration and deceleration, the jump strength, the effects of gravity, fall speed, enable or disable double jump, and all these kinds of things. So what we're going to do is we're going to change the jump strengths. Right now he's jumping a little too high. We're going to dial it back down to like 300. Now if we just use 300, you're going to see that all of a sudden his jump is much smaller, too small. But that's okay, because another thing we're going to do is we're going to add a jump sustain. So right now, when we hit the jump button, he automatically jumps to his max height. But that's not how jumping in Mario works, right? The longer you hold down the button, the farther he'll jump. This gives you a little bit of extra control. Good for platforming. So we're going to add some time to our sustain. So how many milliseconds we can hold down the button to sustain that jump beyond the first burst. So what we're going to do is we're going to set it to, I don't know, maybe 400. You kind of play around with these until you can see what works. So let's try it now. We can tap and get a little jump like that, but if we hold it, we can go really high. So maybe 400 is a little too high. Let's dial that back down to maybe like 250. Try it again. Let's see how that works. It's still a lot, but you know, it's good enough for this demonstration, I guess. 200, fuck it. All right, so we have the jumping and stuff set up, but he doesn't animate. Like, you know, he just kind of, you're just dragging the single picture around, and that's not enough. So what we're going to do is we're going to double click on Mario again. We're going to go back into this sprite editor, and we have the idle animation, so obviously we should add some more. So let's add an animation by right clicking here. And it's just going to create this big box, because again, by default, it makes these big boxes, because again, not everything is going to be a tiny 16 by 16 drawing. So what we're going to do is we're going to right click down here. We're going to import frames from files. So we can import multiple frames from once. So let's add all 3 of Mario's running sprites at the same time. So now you can see, I can zoom all the way back in. If you're not looking at low resolution like this, you won't have to keep zooming in and out. We're going to delete this first empty frame, and now we have the 3 frames of Mario running. Now you can see our bounding box is set up properly this time. If not, all we would have to do is we could go back to this previous one here that we know is correct, and you can right click on the bounding box and say apply to all animations. It'll copy and paste this box to the rest of them, so it'll never change. But let's go back to our animation here. Let's rename this to something better than animation 1. Let's just say run. Now down here, we didn't have to worry about this before, but since this has multiple frames, we've got to worry about the speed, how fast it plays these frames. 5 is very slow. Let's do something like 12. 12 isn't super fast, but there's not a lot of frames here, so we want to make sure all of them are visible and it reads like a running loop. So you can also say, do you want the animation to repeat over and over again? And we do. We don't want to just go through these 3 frames and then freeze on this one for the rest of the time moving. So we will enable looping. And now you can exit out of that. And if we play the game, nothing happens. And the reason nothing happens is because we haven't told the game what to do with that animation we just created. It's there, it's ready to go, but until we can tell the platform behavior and the game engine itself what to do with that animation we just created, it won't know how to use it, so it just won't. So this is where event sheets come into play. So this is kind of like Construct's version of programming. It's all basically choosing from menus and choosing causes and effects as opposed to sitting there and typing things in very cryptically. Let's go over to our event sheet. It is currently empty, so we're going to add an event. And we have a couple objects here. We have system, which is just like stuff the engine itself can do. We have Mario and we have our sprite, which is our floor, which you should probably rename so we don't get confused later down the line. But let's say Mario, and let's look through all these. You can see there's tons of different options you have, but what we want to do is our platform behavior, and we want to do when Mario is jumping, let's add an action. So this is like the left side is like triggers, and then the right side's responses. So we're going to add a response to this. So when Mario is jumping, what do we want Mario to do? We want to set the animation to, oops, you know what? I am getting ahead of myself here. What we want to do is on moved. I'm thinking of jumping. We haven't even done jumping yet. Well, we will get there, my friends. So platform on moved. So this means when Mario is moving, we're going to add a animation for the run. So let's go back to our layout. Let's try it out now and see what happens. So you can see he's running, but if we stop, he keeps running. Because we've told the game when you start moving to start playing the run. But we haven't told it what to do when to stop. And this is a problem you're probably going to run into a lot with any sort of game programming, is that computers are super liberal. They don't, or not super liberal, they're super literal. They don't understand any kind of assumed context that if we're talking to another person, you probably would. Right? Because I was telling you, oh, when something moves, play a running animation. You kind of automatically assume to stop it when it stops. Computer doesn't do that because it's stupid. So we got to specifically tell the engine exactly what to do. So we're going to add another event here. We're going to say Mario. Then go down to our platforming. We're going to do on stopped. We'll add another action. And we'll say here, we'll set the animation again, but this time to idle. Done. And now if we go back and play it again, he stops when we stop. So there we go, we have this working. But there are two things you might notice right now. If we jump, still nothing happens, which we'll have to fix. And sometimes if we're jumping while he's moving, he still runs in the air, which is not what we want to do. So we're going to fix both of those right now. And you can see once you're done jumping, it'll still play. So again, super literal. We got to make sure that we account for all these different conditions. And we can do that pretty easily. So let's go back to our events. So running and stopping, right? These are both things we want him to do, but only on the floor. When he's in the air, we want him to do something completely different. So we're going to add another event above it. Now you can add these really in any order, but it's kind of like to keep things clean. So we're going to say Mario, and then we're going to go down to our platforming events. Now we're going to say is on floor. So that just means whenever he's touching the ground, right? Now this alone isn't going to do anything. So what we're going to do is we're going to make these both sub events. So what that means is that these will be in effect when this one is in effect. So it's basically, we're going to make these children effects of this one. So when Mario is on the floor, Mario does this. And where we set that is we just drag these over to here until you get that indentation, and now they're sub events. So these will only be effective now when Mario is on the floor. Now this is part of the solution, but not the whole thing, because we still haven't told Mario what to do when he's in the air. And without that, this actually won't change anything. It'll work exactly the same. So let's go back to our layout and let's give Mario that jump animation I jumped the gun on trying to get set up earlier. We're going to add another animation. We're going to call it jump right from the beginning because I already spoiled it. You know exactly what's coming. And we're just going to import a graphic, Mario jump. You can see it tried to make a weird collision shape again. So if we go up here to idle, right click, apply to all animations. If we go back down here, now it's set correctly. We don't have to worry about looping or speed because it's just one frame, so it's fine. We'll close out of that. Let's go back to our event sheet. Now, we're going to add another event. Mario, let's go to the platform is jumping. We'll add an action here. Mario, we want to set the animation this time to jump. Cool. So now, if we run the game, let's check it out now. We have running, we have stopping, and we have jumping. But here's the problem. he doesn't go back to standing when he stops, because again, we haven't told it what to do when Mario lands. He'll start running when we start moving, because we told it what to do when it moves. But that jump part, that's gonna be kind of weird. You can see, especially if we're moving like this, you're still running into some issues. No pun intended. So let's close out of that, and let's fix that. We're gonna go back into our event sheet here. We're gonna add another event, and we're gonna do Mario, go down to our platformers. And this time we want to use on landed, when he lands from a jump. Add an action, Mario, we're gonna set that animation again to idle. Okay, so let's test that and make sure it works. We didn't miss anything that we might not be thinking about. All right, oh, uh-oh. Now what? Now we're still getting some sliding. He's going back to idle, but we want him to run if he's running. We don't want him to lose his momentum. It looks weird. So this is where sub-events can come in handy again. So we're going to say platform on landed, but we're going to indent two things just like we did up here. So we can hit S on our keyboard. We'll quickly add a sub-event. And we'll say Mario, go down to our platforms. If he's moving, and this is a sub-event, so on landed while moving, we're going to add an event. We're going to say for Mario to set the animation to run, right? Because if he's running, we want to keep that momentum going. And then we'll add another sub-event here. Now we're going to say if Mario is not moving, or another way to do this, actually even easier, we could add another event for on moving that invert it, so not moving. But since we only have these two states, moving or not moving, we can just hit X, which adds an else. An else is just like, if none of these apply, do this. In which case, we're just going to take this idle, which we already had up here, we can just drag it down here. So what this means is on the land, when Mario lands, if he's moving up when he's landing, start running. Otherwise, have him just stay still, because you're just staying still. So let's take another peek and make sure this works properly. All right, that works, and that works. So Mario is almost completely set up to go. There's just obviously one more thing really that we haven't taken into account, and he doesn't turn around when we go the other way. He's kind of just moonwalking, which could be good for the Michael Jackson game for Sega, but not what we're looking for here. So let's quickly add that as well. So we're going to need to add a new object to our project for this. So I'm going to double click here. We're going to add the keyboard object. So this allows us to make events using specific keys on the keyboard itself. So now we're going to add an event here. We're going to choose keyboard this time. We're going to do on key down. So when a key is being held down, we can choose whatever key we want. We'll start with the right arrow key. We'll hit OK. We'll hit done. So when the right arrow key is down, what are we going to do? Let's add an action, Mario. We're going to set mirrored, right? So Mario's facing right by default. So when the arrow keys, the right arrow key is down, we don't want it to be mirrored. So say not mirrored. Now we can add another event. Do keyboard again. Key is down. This time we'll choose the left arrow key. And this time we want him to be mirrored. So we'll say set mirrored to true. So let's try this all out now. Goes left, goes right, jumps, mirrors when he jumps, lands fine. You can hold the jump to go higher. And there you go, my friends. Mario is all set up to go. You have NES Mario set up and totally working. And only took a few minutes. Didn't take any coding. Most of it was already set up with a couple clicks, and then you just had a couple specific actions you set up to take into account some of the more nitty-gritty details. Now, there's other things you can easily do. For example, if we wanted to have, another platform to jump on, we can just hold down Control and duplicate this, make it a little smaller. We can have him jump up onto this platform. And then another thing we can do, let's add a new sprite this time. And we'll just make this one brown, kind of like, the boxes in World 1-1. They definitely look prettier than this, but just roll with me here. So we're gonna add a new box. We're going to shrink this one down also to 16 by 16. And actually, let's put this one down here. And we'll put this one up above. And you'll see why in just a second. We'll drag this one out, make it a little bit bigger. We're going to add a behavior to this one. And this is going to be a jump through. So this makes this platform work a lot like certain blocks in Mario where you can jump through them up, but not back down. And again, didn't have to code any of that, it's done automatically. So now, if we run the game, can go over here, can jump right through this one, land on top, then jump on this one. But if we try and jump through this one, it doesn't work because it's solid. So just like that, we've set up basic platforming. And yeah, so obviously there's way more you can do with Construct. You can check out a zooming the vertical slice if you want to see all I've done with Construct so far. There's tons of other great examples on Scrura Arcade, which is the company that makes Construct. And, you know, GDevelop and Stencil do very similar things like this. And I just thought this was interesting because there's so many people I've talked to that don't think they can make games, and I was one of them. But, come on. This is pretty easy. Just made Mario in like 15 minutes. So, that's all. Be the games you want to see. Make the games you want to make. I'll talk to you guys in the next one.